Hello, 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 and welcome to the Games Monster podcast here on Extremed.tv. Welcome. So, my name is David Pstansky, and today we're going to be talking all about the Evercade Versus. Yes, this is a very exciting announcement recently for retro video game lovers everywhere. Now, if you are familiar with everything that I've been doing recently, then you'll know that I've been covering the Evocade. If you haven't checked it out already, then do head over to our YouTube channel, which is youtube.com/extreme improv, and also the website extremed.tv, spelled XSTREAMED.tv, and we have been covering Evercade games. We've done 3 full reviews of games. We've done the Atari Collection 1, we've done the Namco Collection 1, Namco Museum Collection 1, and we have done the Oliver Twins Collection. And we're going to have all of the Evercade games covered in the coming weeks and months, especially as new ones get released, and especially we're going to be covering more of the Evercade Versus, which will be out later this year. Now, if you haven't got an Evercade, if you're not familiar with the little wonder that could, the Evercade is a retro-inspired handheld machine, or at least that's what it's been correctly defined as up until now, that came out about a year ago, and you get cartridges. So yes, this is a cartridge-based system, and you plug in cartridges, and each cartridge has got anywhere from one. See, it's going to sound dodgy when I say 2. Like, there's one collection that's like 2 recent indie games together in a bundle. I believe it's just 2. That's one of the few games I haven't got yet. But usually they've got 10, 12, 15, 20 games on each cartridge. And so, like, for example, let me grab one because I've got one to hand. Let's see, well, I've got a few to hand, but here I've got the Evercade Atari Collection 2, which we'll be covering in an upcoming review. And on it, just to give you the list of games, it's got Basket Brawl, Yar's Revenge, Stellaris, Centipede, Asteroids, Radar Lock, Sprint Master, Haunted House, Desert Falcon, Demons to Diamonds, Millipede, Submarine Commander, Planet Smashers, Real Sports Tennis, Wizard, Human Cannibal, Dark Chambers, Street Racer, Bowling, and Air Sea Battle all on it. So that's 4, 8, 12, 16, 20 games on one cartridge. And so they're only about £15 for a cartridge, and the machine itself is something like £79, and maybe that even comes with, I think that's like the premium edition that comes with 3 cartridges. It might be £59 and comes with 1 cartridge. It's incredibly good value if you like these older games. Now, obviously, I just read out what you get in the Atari Collection 2. But you get things like the Oliver Twins Collection, which has got loads of old NES games, but they were games that were familiar to people who had things like the Amiga or the Atari ST. There's the Worms Collection coming out, which I think has just got 3 games on it, but one of them is a game that came out on like N64 and PlayStation, and one of them may even be a game that even saw a release on Dreamcast. I'm trying to remember what's on it. There's Worms Blast, I believe, is the one that even came out on Dreamcast. So it's a really varied range of systems that this machine can cover. And now they have announced a home console. Now, one of the things for people who already have the Evercade will be aware of is that you can connect the Evercade to a HD TV and play the games on your big screen. But it's a little bit like when you used to play like PlayStation Portable, PlayStation Vita games connected to the big screen, in that you're holding the actual console. It doesn't display like Wii U, it doesn't display dual screens or anything. It just puts the video signal to the television. But it's not quite the same experience as if you were playing like with a Super Nintendo controller, or playing something with like an NES controller or an Atari controller. Well, the Evercade Versus does take a step towards fixing that, just because it comes with a controller which we'll discuss in more detail in a moment, but it's clearly inspired, I think, chiefly by the Super Nintendo controller, or you could say the PlayStation 1 controller, but we'll come again to that in a moment. But the biggest thing is that you can do multiplayer. Now, if there was perhaps one flaw with the handheld Evercade, and there might even be some firmware update and a workaround for this if they release a cable, you can't play multiplayer games. So, like, you play the Evercade and it's single player games only, at least for everything I understood. If someone tells me I've really misunderstood this over the last year, I do apologise. But the Evercade Versus, you'll be able to plug in up to 4 controllers, and they've got like a USB port, so I think you can use their controllers, but you can certainly use the Evocade itself as an additional controller, and I'm sure there will be some support for others, but I don't know that for certain just yet. So, for example, if you could use like an Xbox controller, that would be great. But you also can plug in 2 cartridges at once, and I'm trying to think of what other machines allowed you to do this. I know that the Tiger Gamecom allowed you to plug in 2 cartridges at once, and quite possibly the Nokia N-Gage allowed you to plug in 2 cartridges at once, maybe on a revision, I'm not sure, maybe I'm making that one up there. But certainly for a home console, if you get something like the Retron 5, then in a sense you could plug in 5 cartridges, but you could only access the games on one of them at a time, just because they'll say you've got to take the other cartridges out, just so it doesn't explode it or something, I guess. But anyway, let's go into what everything we've got here about the Evercade Versus. Now, one of the things they point out with it is it will output into 1080p, which means that you can have a full HD experience. Now, obviously, we're in a world where if you go into the shops these days, you can see like 8K televisions. But obviously, if you're going to be playing the original Pac-Man, you don't really need 8K. But having full HD is good. And it says here about the fact that you can, let's go over like the stats that it gives. It gives you here retro gaming, and then the first thing it actually goes to is up to 4 players. So it's Evercade Versus. Now, I'm not sure what games are up to 4 players out of the games available. It'd be interesting just to see if there are any listings which ones say have got, this is a 2-player game, this is a 4-player game. It's very few 3-player games that exist, except for something like Zelda Triforce Heroes. But let's see what else it says. It says Evercade Versus expands the possibilities of retro gaming at home. Using the Evercade cartridge infrastructure, the Versus can have 2 carts simultaneously, expanding the available playable games up to 40 games at any one time. So that would suggest that 20 games is the limit, at least as games currently are. And that sounds about right, I just haven't checked it. I know that this Atari cartridge got 20 on it, so the original Atari Collection 1 I think had also got 20, so that would be 40. So the Evercade family has over 260 fully licensed games available and is continuing to grow. Now, one thing which I heard, but I haven't actually read this other than just what other people said, is that you can't play the Namco games on it because they license this for handheld. Now, if that's the case, that's a real shame, and I hope they get that solved and resolved, and a firmware update fixes that, because just the very idea that you can't play Pac-Man on this would be a crying shame. The Namco Museum Collection 1 was the first game I reviewed on it, because it was the one I was super excited to get, just for the nostalgia of it all, playing some Gallagher, etc. But if it's not to be on this for the meantime, hopefully at some point they'll sort it. Now, I can't imagine why they wouldn't be able to sort it unless there's some other like mini arcade. So obviously you can get the arcade 1-up Pac-Man sort of thing, and so if there's some other plug and play like home console, which means that they can't license it at the moment, hopefully they'll get that sorted. See what it says. The Versus will allow support for up to 4 players with Evercade game controllers or other USB game controllers. So that's just solved that mystery. It shows here that you can plug in the 2 cartridges, and what's quite good about this is being able to plug in 2 cartridges at the front it kind of justifies the shape of the machine, because the machine looks very much like a NES. It's got the drawer which opens at the top, the flap. Sorry, I'm like super tired. It's currently almost 2 a.m. where I'm recording this. Just because I needed to get this this recorded now, so I can get it up for the morning. But it does mean it's going to be like an ASMR video. And I made that same joke on the last podcast I had to record about Spider-Man a few minutes ago, but whatevs. So yeah, the flap on the front makes it very much like the NES. The fact that it's like this white design with red is obviously very reminiscent of the Famicom, and just like the little white design of it kind of reminds me of the Wii, in fact. Having 4 USB ports on the front, they're all spaced out evenly, but having the 2 cartridges slot into the front kind of justifies its size and shape, because otherwise you think this thing could be a lot smaller. The controllers, they're slightly rectangular, so in that sense they kind of look a bit more NES or Master System like, but they've got these slightly rounded protrusions, I guess. They haven't got like the prongs that like from the PlayStation and N64 era onwards had got. So in that sense it looks a little bit more, tiny bit towards dog bony shape, not quite dog bony shape, but certainly more in the realms of Super Nintendo, I think, rather than NES. But they are tiny bit more rectangular rather than rounded, so a bit more NES in that sense. I assume that's like a home button in the middle. Yeah, it's like a menu button in the middle, which is a big button. Then start and select are weirdly, in fact, I might have to just have a quick peek at the actual Evocade. So start and select on the Evocade handheld are under the diamond ABXY buttons, whereas on the Evercade Versus, the start and select buttons are more geared for your left hand to use next to the D-pad. And that's just a little bit, that's a strange choice in my opinion. I don't know why they couldn't have had it uniform to the handheld device. It says here, Evercade Versus is one of the most powerful mini retro gaming consoles in the market. So one of the most powerful, what does that mean realistically? Like, you can get things out there that can play PS1, N64, Dreamcast games, possibly that, depending what they count as mini things, because obviously if you get like a Retro Pi and stuff, then all of those games are possible. But it says here, one of the most powerful. It says it gives the first to output native 1080p, so that's very good. Quad-core 1.5 GHz processor will power a brand new user interface, and the best emulation available emulation for consoles and arcade titles. Now, what arcade titles do we have emulated currently on the Evocade? I'm trying to think, because on the Atari collection, it's just looking at the back of the box, I think all of them, 2600 or 7800 or 1 or 2, but none of them I believe are arcade ports. Pac-Man certainly wasn't, in my opinion, but maybe I'm wrong. It says the Evocade family features the best-in-class emulation for classic consoles and arcade machines with Wi-Fi capability. So I don't think this is going to have online play, but it'll allow you to perhaps connect to get firmware updates. It says receive updates to firmware, so exactly what you said, games and operational improvements without needing to connect to a computer or external devices. See, I think that's super important just in terms of if Namco are saying that you can't get the Namco games on this, they'll want to solve that and they'll want to update that at some point. Let's see what else we've got on the information. Together, the new Evercade Versus can have up to 4 players. I'd be really interested to see what that offers in terms of 4-player games. And it says the new expanded bumper controls with the L1, L2, R1, R2 support to 90s control schemes. Now, this is the most interesting part of the package, in my opinion, just because every Evercade game released will work on this, except for the aforementioned Namco collections. And since they all were designed and put out for the handheld Evocade, the handheld Evocade doesn't have an L2 or R2 button. So what are they for? Because none of the games that are currently out require them. But if you look at the controller again, even though it's somewhere between a NES and Super NES controllers, that same amount of buttons and layout would be exactly the same as a PlayStation 1, like the original PlayStation, because that had obviously a design where it got the extended prongs, but otherwise was basically a Super Nintendo controller, but then they added on an L2 and R2. So this suggests that there will be something exclusive that uses this, and we'll get to that in one moment. Let's see what else it says. It says the Evercade family is ready for home gaming with multiple games already available with 2-player support and more coming. See, that's what's interesting. With already available with 2-player support. So can you do 2-player on the Evercade handheld? Because I've obviously just got this. We're in a pandemic, so I don't know myself. So let's just have a look, because I might be just completely misleading you. I don't think you can get a 2-player connector. No, I can't see that you can. But it says that they've got 2-player support. It'd be good if they actually just put a link cable, because they've shown that you will be able to use the Evercade handheld as a controller. So just release the link cable, but obviously that cable will plug in one end into the Evercade, the other end into the USB port. So they'll need one with matching connectors, so that you can plug into 2 Evercades for that. But hopefully they can do it. Use of any USB controllers, including wireless dongles. You can even use the Evocade handheld console as a controller with a special red USB cable sold separately. Now it says pre-order. Is that just about the machine? Let's check what that says. Yeah, it looks like there's pre-order on the machine. And so that's about it. But the other thing on the trailer for it, and we don't have it here. I can play the trailer. In fact, let's just make sure this is muted so it doesn't flag anything that it's not supposed to. Is at the end where it says Evercade Versus, it then says, let's see what it says actually, because it says about all individual Atari names and games, blah blah blah, Data East, Codemasters, blah blah blah. It doesn't say anything here about that you can't play the Namco games, but I think there is something. So here it shows the Evercade Versus with 2 controllers on the top, and it shows all of the games available at the back. Now when I say it shows all the games available at the back, it shows 1, 3, 4, 5. So each of the Evercade games has got a number on it. So imagine if like PlayStation 2 or PS4 or Wii games had got like a number for which game you've got, like you're collecting stickers, and it's like, oh, I've not got trading card number 205, and it's like costs a £40 game or something. But these are numbered because they're only 20 cartridges that it's showing here, and they're only about £15 each, which is still a lot more than buying trading cards, but when you get 20 games on it, it seems quite worth it. But so on this background picture, it shows cartridges 1, 3, 4, 5, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20. And so it doesn't have number 2 and it doesn't have number 6, and they are the Namco Museum collection. So hopefully they'll get that sorted at some point. Great that they have all of the others that are ready to go and licensed. But then what you'll notice if you watch the trailer is all of the games listed along the back have got red sleeves, and then at the end, one I didn't mention, is there's a second game that's got the number 1, and it has a purple sleeve, and it says, what is this then? With a question mark, and there's a question mark at the bottom, whereas all of the other cartridges have got the company logo like the Atari or Data East or Interplay logo. This one has just got a question mark. Now for me, what this is going to be is something which is going to justify why there are these extra shoulder buttons and possibly 4-player. Now, this might be a much more powerful machine than the Evercade, and it might be capable of running N64, PS1, Saturn and Dreamcast games as a minimum. But what about the controllers? Because even though it says that you can use any USB controllers, is that their ace up the sleeve? That if you want to play, that you can for example, get an N64 game, like, I'm trying to think of one that would be within the realms of possibility. But if we gave Super Mario 64, because obviously that's not possible, but we use that as the example, that needs an analog stick. And yes, you get Worms Armageddon, and like I said, and Worms Blast, and they came out on the Dreamcast. And if you can play that on the handheld with a D-pad, it's quite possible that that game played with a D-pad on the N64. I don't think I ever had it for the 64, so I don't remember. But let's have a quick think. What possible games could there be? Now, PS1 certainly seems like it's very possible, because the PS1 originally came out with a controller with the exact same amount of buttons as the Evercade VS. So any of the early PS1 games, and again, if you want Namco to get on board with things, maybe there could be Tekken and Tekken 2 and Soul Blade and Soul Edge and whatever else. And Tombi, was that one? I can't remember if that was Namco. But any of these era games, and you could have... I'm trying to think what else from like the PS1 era. Just any of those early PS1 games. It's not going to happen, but you could have Crash Bandicoot. That was a 3D platformer, but you would play it with a D-pad. You could have Resident Evil if you got a Capcom collection. Now, it's interesting that there isn't a Capcom collection yet, because Capcom seems to put out collections on everything. But maybe they wouldn't, just because they've got their own home arcade stick, which they might feel that would compete with, rather than so. But then again, you can get a Capcom 30th or 25th anniversary collection of Street Fighters or all sorts. Capcom should release one. But maybe there would be... Imagine if there was a collection, it got Resident Evil on it. Resident Evil and Capcom collection could have like Street Fighter 2, Final Fight, Resident Evil, and then it could have like Ghouls and Ghosts, and maybe Dino Crisis, and Street Fighter X Plus Alpha. Things that would like be a good mix of, well, this is... But then again, that just saying that, if you've got a collection, it's like the Purple collection, and it's like, well, this has got Ghouls and Ghosts on it, which could absolutely play on the Evocade handheld, but then this cartridge is only for the Evocade Versus because it's got Resident Evil on it, and that wouldn't perhaps work on the Evocade handheld. Then wouldn't that be a bit of a bummer? Would it? Or maybe it's like, well, you can still play Street Fighter 2 and Ghouls and Ghosts on the handheld, but Resident Evil will only work on the Versus. Again, I feel like that's kind of muddying the waters and splitting the audience, but I think absolutely this is what they are doing here, unless the purple sleeve saying, what is this then, is just to refer to, well, this is Season 2, because obviously with Mega Cat Collection 2 on the list as cartridge number 20, that is a nice round number, and so it could be, well, this, just like the way I thought of it, is like the WWF Hasbro wrestling action figures, that you'd get the green card, which was the elusive one, and the red card and the blue card, and each card colour would have like 5 or 6 action figures, and then they'd go to a different colour, and that would be like, well, this is Series 2. So if you had Series 1 of the Evocade and they were on the red sleeve boxes, then Series 2 might work on all Evocade machines, whether it's the Versus or the handheld, and it might just be, well, this is the purple collection, just so that you can sort of separate them out a little bit in your mind. Who knows? Either way, I'm super excited by the prospect of the Evocade Versus, and I will certainly be reviewing all of the other Evercade games in the run-up to the launch of the Versus, and I will be pre-ordering the Versus very soon. I haven't pre-ordered it yet just because I've got enough other things to be getting on with. In fact, it says this, oh yeah, you've got to enter your email address. But there's going to be lots more of these podcasts. This is the Games Monster podcast, and I cover all aspects of gaming. Anyone who knows me and been listening to the podcast for the last couple of years will know that I love retro gaming, But it's not just retro gaming. This weekend I'm going to be covering Resident Evil 8. I'll probably do a podcast covering the Resident Evil 8 demo that's been available for the last couple of weeks. So do listen out for that. This isn't necessarily a weekly podcast. Sometimes it's been more than a week, but hopefully as things really start to ramp up with everything on Extreme TV, this will become a more daily or several times a week style podcast, just where I cover subjects or things that are in the news or games that I'm playing at the moment. So I would really love your support. I know, like tonight, I sound super tired, like it's the Games Monster Extreme Improv Extremed ASMR video, and I do apologise for that, but if this is helping lull you to sleep, then that's also a good thing as far as I can tell. And make sure you go over to youtube.com/Extreme Improv and smash that subscribe button. Please do help us grow the channel. And we have so many great shows every week. We have about 8 or 10 live streaming shows, which are like live comedy, improv comedy, like Whose Lines It Anyway. We have a social deduction game, Revenge of the Ripper, which is based on Mafia and Werewolf. We've got like the Jester's Jam, which is a joke telling show. Tomorrow we're going to have our debut of Sketch Battle, which is not Sketch Battle, of Totally Sketchy, which is a new art-based show, which like quick-fire drawing-based games taken on by a bunch of performers. We're going to have the Geek Battle, which focuses on all things geeky and is a mix of trivia and silly challenges mixed in with a bit of improv. The Slam Jam Wrestling Show. I just about to do a episode of the Slam Jam Wrestling podcast. So there's tons and tons of content, and I hope it's all going to be stuff you enjoy. So it's comedy, there's gaming, there's general geekiness, there's all sorts of stuff. Do check it out, hit that subscribe. But anyway, for now, there's going to be loads more reviews of the Evercade and Evocade games coming up. So youtube.com/Extreme Improv and check out last week's review of the Oliver Twins collection. For now though, stay safe, always stay extremed, and bye for now.